Hello everyone, wishing you all a joyful and peaceful new day. Today, we continue to follow the emotional journey of single mother Hoai Ca and the kind-hearted police officer and Hung. Hoai Ca is a resilient and hardworking young woman, but life seems to keep testing her with one hardship after another. What lies ahead for her on this challenging path? And will Hung continue to stand by her and her child, like a steady shelter in the storm? Don't go anywhere just yet. Stay with the channel to witness the next chapter in Hoai Ca's journey, and help lift the spirits of this brave young woman. This morning, though the sky was still gloomy and the ground hadn't yet dried after last night's rain, Hoai Ca quietly set out to the fields with 2 bamboo baskets balanced on her shoulders. Rain or shine, far or near, she had to go. The crops won't wait for anyone. Hoai Ca is a girl with sparkling eyes and hair always neatly tied behind her neck. Was born and raised in a poor rural village on the edge of the forest. Her life has been closely tied to the fields, the mud, and the village paths soaked with rainwater and early morning dew. But never once did her circumstances cause her to falter. On the contrary, her diligence and tireless work ethic forged within her a remarkable will and an incredibly enduring heart. Lately, the weather has been erratic. Blistering sun one moment, sudden downpours the next, making farm work even more exhausting. But the melons still had to be harvested. If left too long, they would overripen or spoil from excess water. Once ripe, if not picked in time, all the care and effort would be wasted. The melon field appeared at the end of a waterlogged path. The vines covered the ground, lush and vibrant after the rain. She stepped gently between the narrow rows, deftly parting the broad leaves to search for ripe fruits. Mud clung to the hem of her pants. Each step seemed heavier, yet she did not pause. Alone in the vast, seemingly endless field, no voices, only the sound of her steady breathing, the rustle of leaves under her hands, and the small silhouette of a girl gathering the fruits of her labor. Every step weighed down, but she patiently lifted each leaf, cherishing each melon as if afraid to break the effort behind it. Each melon was placed carefully into the basket. Her hands gently brushed off the clinging dirt, a gesture she'd repeated countless times over many harvests. Her conical hat shaded most of her face. Only her quiet figure could be seen in the lush green field. The baskets were slowly filling up, but she hadn't stopped. As long as there were fruits to pick, she wanted to gather them all. Under the cloudy, overcast sky, looking at the heavy basket of melons by her feet, her heart felt just a little bit lighter. Not far away, heavy black clouds quietly gathered, gradually swallowing the sky that had already been overcast since early morning. The wind began to rise in the treetops, initially just a few faint gusts, but soon it howled, as if urging a storm that was drawing near. The air seemed to thicken, gloomy and suffocating. Only a moment later, the distant forest suddenly shifted violently. The leaves rustled, bowing down with each strong gust of wind. Then, from above, the rain poured down in torrents, as if someone had just emptied a whole sky's worth of water onto the earth. Everything disappeared in a blur of white rain, wind, and mist. Hung stood at the house's porch, his eyes staring at the white, torrential rain. The rain grew heavier, and the wind howled through every crack of the door. His heart felt like it was on fire. I wonder if Hoai Ca is all right. With this heavy rain, the floodwaters must have reached the fields by now. He stood frozen for a while, restless. If the rain stopped, he would definitely go in to check to see if anything had happened to her and her child, and how their house was holding up. He couldn't just sit still like this. Meanwhile, outside in the field, Hoai Ca continued to diligently cut melons, her hands moving quickly as if racing against time. She didn't even notice when the sky turned darker. The wind began to whip through, biting cold, thunder rumbled from the distant horizon, and then bright flashes of lightning split the gloomy sky. She paused, glancing around nervously, then quickly turned off her phone fearing the lightning, but didn't dare to leave her work. There was still a few more rows to go, and the melons were ripe and full. After all the effort she had put in, she decided to move deeper into the field. Her conical hat was soaked through, her shirt sleeves stained with rain, and her hands were caked in mud up to her elbows. Every time she bent down, she could feel the soggy ground beneath her feet. The rain started to come down even harder. The rainwater spilled over from the trenches, seeping into every step she took, icy cold. But she kept going, just a little bit more. In the town, the people had not yet had time to recover. The flood came in the blink of an eye, without warning, offering no time for anyone to prepare. It arrived as quickly as the furious wrath of nature, and then it retreated just as hastily, leaving behind mud, debris, destroyed houses, and the vacant stares of those who remained. The ground had been severely eroded by the water. The cement layer peeled off, cracked into pieces, as if it had just survived a small earthquake, revealing large rocks and the soggy red earth underneath. One corner of the floor had collapsed. Plastic chairs and tables tipped over, and bowls and basins scattered across the floor among the muddy streaks that hadn't dried yet. In less than an hour, all the hard work and savings of so many families had turned to ashes, and Hung slowly walked through the muddy stretch of road, where the earth and trash were flooded. On the road, familiar household items, tables, chairs, refrigerators, even beds floated aimlessly, with nothing to cling to. Many houses, even those situated on higher ground, couldn't avoid the floodwater, with the marks of the disaster clearly visible on the stained walls. The only sound that enveloped the entire neighborhood was the voices of people calling out to each other as they cleaned, mixed with the quiet dripping sound of water receding, as if echoing the exhaustion of the villagers after the natural disaster. Amidst the chaotic noise, Hung walked on, his eyes scanning the area, anxiously searching for a familiar figure, the small frame he had been hoping to see all morning. Hoai Ca, where are you? The sky grew darker, with grey clouds drifting silently like a heavy blanket covering the sky. In the distance, the mountains were obscured by the rain, the forest disappearing into a dull silver-grey hue. The rain began to fall more heavily, each drop sinking into his coat, but Hoai Ca remained unshaken. She continued her work, one hand brushing aside leaves, the other carefully lifting the melons, slow and steady, as if trying to collect what little peace could be found amidst the chaotic nature. Two baskets full of melons now rested on her shoulders, the bamboo pole creaking with each step she made through the mud. The road back home stretched endlessly, winding through clumps of trees and muddy fields. The mud clung to her pant cuffs, her back soaked and stuck to her cold skin. The trees lining the road were still green, but beneath her feet, the puddles of muddy water quietly reflected the grey sky. No voices could be heard, only the sound of her sandals splashing through the water and the small figure trudging along, resolute and silent. Mr. Hung arrived at Hoai Circus house. Hoai Ca, Tony. The water's all over the house, where are you two? In front of him was the yard flooded with water, mud stains covering the tile floor. The bamboo fence was leaning, covered in dead leaves. A few banana plants at the back of the yard had been knocked over, their trunks snapped and lying flat on the ground, as if a fierce storm had passed through. Inside the house, the water had receded, leaving behind muddy, soft soil. On the walls, watermarks reached up past the knee, plastic chairs were scattered in a corner. The wardrobe was open, clothes soaked through and spilled all over the place. Please leave a message after the beep. The subscriber you are trying to reach is currently unavailable. Hung stood at the house's porch, phone in hand, but couldn't get through to Hoai Ca. He kept pressing redial. His worried eyes scanned around, not knowing where to find the two of them. He had never seen a flood this big before. Behind the house, the pile of hay had rotted, and the corn hanging from the rafters was soaked. An Hung bent down and began cleaning up. His hands were covered in mud, but he gently gathered each item. At the market, Hoai Ca sat huddled next to the two baskets of melons she had just picked. Under the low makeshift tarp, she spread a thin nylon sheet to sit on. She wiped each melon clean and arranged them neatly. Each fruit seemed to hold the essence of days spent under the sun and dew. The village market, still damp from the rain, had a slippery, muddy ground. The smell of wet earth mixed with the scent of vegetables, the mud, and the chill of early morning winds, making the scene seem even harsher. Yet, she smiled gently, calling out, "Buy some melons, ma'am. They're sweet and ripe." A middle-aged woman stopped. "How much per kilogram, dear?" "Just 20,000, Hoai Ca replied. "I'll take 5 kilograms. Hoai Ca quickly picked up a melon, placed it on the scale, and wrapped it neatly in a bag. Each motion was practiced and smooth, as if she had been doing this her whole life. Every time she made a sale, a flicker of joy appeared in her eyes. A few extra tens of thousands meant she could buy rice and some meat for tonight's dinner. Soon, more customers arrived. Some asked the price, others picked out melons. She bent down to weigh one, while her mouth quickly responded to another. Sweat dotted her temple, though the cold breeze still crept through the gaps in the tarp. The scent of ripe melons floated in the air, blending with the smell of the earth after the rain, making one feel a deep sympathy for the small, quiet figure sitting in the market that morning, silently strong and resilient. At home, the chicken coop had collapsed. Straw was scattered everywhere, blowing in the wind. A few surviving chickens huddled under the banana tree, their feathers soaked and their eyes wide with panic. And Hung stood silently before the scene, his heart feeling as if it were being squeezed. Everything had been peaceful just yesterday, and now. He walked into the rabbit pen, a place he hadn't dared to check all morning. Luckily, a few rabbits were still alive, though trembling with cold. One small rabbit lay flat in a corner, its legs stretched out, no longer moving. He knelt down, his hands shaking, as he gathered dry straw and spread it in a nest right outside the porch, the least muddy spot he could find. One by one, he gently lifted each rabbit and carried it there. The paralyzed rabbit was carried separately, and he softly stroked its back before placing it in a corner of the straw, as if to give it some peace to recover. When he was done, he sat on the porch step, the place where the water hadn't reached yet. The wind still swept through every crack in the house. His eyes stared blankly at the dirt road in the distance, where Hoai Ca still hadn't returned. His hand rested on his knee, his shoulders hunched forward as if bearing the weight of every worrying. The house was in ruins now. The thatched roof was tattered, the earth around the house had been severely eroded, forming deep pits close to the water's edge, where the muddy floodwaters still hadn't receded. The bamboo fence had fallen, trees lay broken, and trash and banana trunks were scattered all over the yard, like the brutal remnants of the flood. Meanwhile, Hoai Ca was sitting by her bags, next to the nearly empty baskets of melons. She picked out a few small ones and set them aside, for Tony to eat later, she told herself, with a soft smile. She counted the crumpled bills carefully. Though it wasn't much, it would be enough for a meager meal for the next few days. A faint smile passed over her face, her cheeks still damp from rain and market dust, as if it were a small comfort amidst the endless bustle. The sky remained overcast, and the cold wind still blew through the aftermath of the rain. She carried the baskets back, walking along the long dirt road, her feet sinking in the mud. Her old conical hat had a tear at the edge, and her wet coat stuck to her back, yet she didn't seem to mind at all.
Still waiting for Hoai Ca to return, Mr. Hung couldn't sit still. He began cleaning up the house that had been ravaged by the flood. He carefully carried out the items that were still usable and placed them on the porch, trying to tidy up little by little amid the chaos. The flood waters had surged inside, leaving the floor covered in mud and debris, turning the room into a scene of complete disarray. Hoai Ca slowly walked down the muddy village road, the 2 baskets heavy in her hands. The rain had stopped, but the scene before her made her heart tighten. She hadn't expected the flood to hit so severely. The mud covered the ground up to her ankles, with trash piled up on both sides of the road. Villagers were bent over, cleaning up, their faces gaunt and tired. The houses along the road bore the clear marks of devastation, cracked walls, torn roofs, and soaked belongings scattered across the yards. It looked like the aftermath of a nightmare. A wave of anxiety rose within Hoai Ca, almost choking her. If even the higher houses were flooded like this, what about her own house, the small home nestled in the valley? Would it still be standing? She bit her lip, gripping the basket handles tightly, her steps growing more hurried. At that moment, all she wanted was to get home as quickly as possible, hoping that, at the very least, something might still remain, even just a little to hold on to. Inside the bamboo-walled house, Anna Hung was bent over, carefully clearing away the debris and mud that had flooded in. The floor was covered with dry branches, fallen leaves, and mud, bearing the intense marks of the flood's fury. After a long walk, Hoai Ca finally returned home. But the sight before her left her frozen. Her familiar house was in ruins, scattered and broken. Water still lingered in the yard, with muddy stains covering every step, every wall. She stood still for a moment, her hands still gripping the basket handles, her eyes scanning around, stunned, as if unable to believe that this place had once been her home. The familiar bike parked in front of the house made her stop for a moment. She softly called his name. Anna Hung stepped out from inside the house, his face showing clear relief upon seeing her, but his eyes still held a trace of worrying.
Mr. Hung looked at Hoai Ca, his gaze lingering on her face, tired from sleepless nights and the overwhelming worries. All the effort she had put into building that home, now it was just a pile of debris after one heavy night of rain. He didn't need to ask to understand how deeply hurt she must be inside. Hoai Ca lowered her head, her voice barely audible, as if blaming herself. This morning, she had gone far to harvest melons. Seeing only light rain, she had tried to finish the work, regretting the time spent nurturing them for days. She never expected the flood to arrive so quickly. By the time she heard the news, it was too late. Mr. Hung sighed. This land next to the forest, with its sloping terrain, with just one heavy downpour, the water from upstream came rushing down like a waterfall. When they bought the land, they were promised a solid concrete embankment. Hoai Ca had even raised the foundation by a meter for extra safety, yet they couldn't escape the sudden flood. This morning, when he saw the rain growing heavier, Mr. Hung felt like there was a fire burning inside him. The road was flooded white, and he could only watch the water rise helplessly, unable to do anything. He had to wait for the water to recede before he could get through. The scene before him left him speechless. The house was destroyed in ruins, and no one answered his calls. His mind was consumed with one fear. What if something had happened to her and her child? Even though they had reunited, his heart was still tight with worrying. Looking at the small girl, her hair messy from the wind and rain, and her face marked by panic, he gently reached out and stroked her hair. No words of comfort could compare to such a silent gesture. He didn't want her to stay here any longer. With the house in such a state, and danger still looming, how could he possibly feel at ease? He told her that she and her child should come stay at his house for now. His mother was always away, and the house was large and empty. She nodded faintly, but her eyes still carried a weight of concern. What about the animals left behind? He reassured her they would figure it out, but for now they needed to focus on getting a proper place for them to sleep. He also mentioned he would go pick up Tony in the afternoon. And then, without saying anything more, he pulled her into his arms. A tight embrace, as if trying to gather all the pain, protecting the fragile part of the small girl. He whispered softly, not to comfort her, but as a promise, in the future, we'll be together in one home. Trash had floated into the house, covering everything. Hoai Ca stood in the midst of the ruined room, looking around at the mess and damage. She could only sigh, then muttered, "I'm so sad, Mr. Hung, I must really have bad luck." Mr. Hung watched her quietly for a moment, then gently reassured her. Yes, the house was damaged, and it was heartbreaking. But at least the two of them were safe. Everything else could be rebuilt. As long as they had each other, they had everything. He said, if the flood had come at night, they couldn't know what might have happened. If you had been inside the house, it would have been so dangerous. Thankfully, the flood came during the day, and at that time, you two weren't home. It was misfortune turned into a blessing. Hoai Ca sighed with relief. Fortunately, the chickens and ducks were still all there. Perhaps when the rain came, they had climbed up to the higher spots in the coop, huddling there. If they hadn't been quick, they might have been swept away too. Hoai Ca quietly gathered a few essential items, folding a few sets of clothes for both mother and child into a bag. It wasn't much, just enough for a few days. She tried to arrange things quickly, but each movement seemed slow, as though she wanted to hold on to the last remnants of her old home. After finishing the temporary packing, Mr. Hung called from outside, his voice rough from the sun and wind, but still filled with concern. "Hoai Ca, are you done? I was thinking, there's a small pen at my place. It should be enough for the rabbits. You can bring them there temporarily. The co-op here is falling apart. They won't be able to stay in it. When we fix it, you can bring them back." Hoai Ca nodded quietly, murmuring a soft yes, and turned back to look at the house one last time. Her eyes were still filled with worrying. She hesitated and then asked softly, as if afraid to hear the answer, "Leaving the house, the chickens, and ducks like this? Is it okay?" Mr. Hung stepped closer, gently placing his hand on her shoulder. His voice was firm but warm. "It's fine, don't worry. We've been through so much already. No one around here would take advantage of us now. You can rest easy." With that, he led the bike to the gate. The late afternoon wind blew through the tin roofs, leaving streaks of rainwater. Everything was still in disarray, but at least they weren't alone in it anymore. "All right, let's go." Hoai Ca, looking back at the ruined house. Hoai Ca couldn't hold back her pain. Silently, she climbed onto Mr. Hong's motorcycle. The bike slowly rolled away from the wreckage. Inside her, worries about the future, about the challenges yet to come, weighed heavily on her heart. The flood had passed, but its marks and consequences were still deeply imprinted, creating a long road ahead for the people here to rebuild their lives.
Chỉ trong vài tiếng ngắn ngủi, cơn lũ bất chợt tràn về cuốn phăng mọi thứ. Khi Hoai Ca trở về sau buổi hái dưa, căn nhà mà cô chất chiêu dựng nên từng chút một giờ chỉ còn là đống đổ nát. Tất cả vụn vỡ, không chỉ mái ngói mà cả những bình yên nhỏ nhoi cô từng giữ gìn. Giữa hoang tàn ấy, một bàn tay lặng lẽ chìa ra vững chãi, không hứa hẹn, không cần nói nhiều, là anh hùng. Người cảnh sát tưởng chừng xa lạ nhưng luôn có mặt khi cô gần như chẳng còn ai bên cạnh. Liệu Hoai Ca có thể đứng dậy sau biến cố này? Liệu tình người và một chút dịu dàng còn sót lại có đủ để sưởi ấm hai mẹ con giữa mùa sau lũ? Và liệu sẽ có một phép màu nào xảy đến nhỏ nhoi nhưng đủ để níu giữ niềm tin? Hãy like, theo dõi kênh để tiếp tục đồng hành cùng hành trình của Hoai Ca, và đừng quên để lại một lời chúc cho mẹ con cô đủ mạnh mẽ để vượt qua những biến cố này nhé.